Okay, first up is Vincent, and mentions that when he tries to animate its scene, it explodes. And if I take a look here, I'm gonna change the timeline here, and I see that the surface jumps in here. I'm gonna go up in the hierarchy for that. All right, so um, there's all this history on that, so that's probably something having to do with the history. And then on the character, I can see, I'm just gonna hide that, parts of the character jump off the character. So to fix this, I'm going to actually go back into the character file, because if you go into the reference editor, you can see it's referencing this file, and some of the problems are in that file. So let's clean up the character rig file first, and then we'll clean up what's in this file that it's being referenced into. So I'm in the rig file. I've renamed it, the file name that I had, I put old on the end because this is, I went through this once already, not recording, where I fixed it. And just a few things to notice. One is the hierarchy is a bit, there's a lot going on here. Like there's some examples somewhere in here where you've got surfaces parented to other surfaces, and just a lot of extra nodes here. So what I'm going to do is select all by type polygon geometry, and I'm going to select in the channels, right mouse click, unlock selected, and then I'm going to group those all. So now everything's in the group here, so all the actual geometry is in there. And then before I get rid of this other stuff, I'm going to do edit, delete all by type, non-deformer history, and then I should be able to delete out all of these nodes. Good. And not sure what that is. Yeah, I shouldn't need that. Okay. So this is kind of cleaned up now. In fact, I could take all of these and middle mouse drag parent it to that one and get rid of that too. Alright, so this is more cleaned up now. And then the other thing I want to make sure of is that there's no keyframes on any of the surfaces here. I'm going to select all by type. Let's just say geometry again. And I can see right here, see this red line? That means that some of the surfaces themselves have keyframes on them. Let's do that again. Let's do actually select all by type, polygon geometry. Yeah, so I can see that there's a keyframe on the surfaces, and really there should never be a keyframe on the surfaces, except for, I don't know, maybe some rare situation, but generally that should not be the case. So with all those selected, I'm going to do edit, delete by type, channels, and we should just be able to use the default options here. I'm just going to reset and do the default options. Let's apply that, and see that red line goes away. So there's no keyframes on there. And if we want, we can lock these again now. Okay. And I'm going to just save, now that this is cleaned up, I'm going to save as that file name. Now, I'm going to keep this old one in case I've screwed something up here. I can always go back to this version, which is unchanged from what you originally sent me, and I'll replace that. Okay. So this is cleaned up now. Now I'm going to go into your scene that has all the geometry in it. I'm not sure why it's called assignment 3.2. I hope you're saving versions of this. It's asking me to find the file, so I'm locating it manually. here's the new one I just saved, I believe, and that's the old one. Okay, and then here, before I change the timeline, I'm going to do edit, delete all by type, non-deformer history to get any history off of any of those other surfaces. So now when I change the timeline, I don't think anything exploded. It looked like one more thing changed there. Try and troubleshoot. Something up here. Oh, this is keyframe 2. So what I would do is let's hide this for a second and let's select all of these surfaces. I'm just going to turn all objects off and select this and do edit, delete by type, channels, and just make sure these are unlocked as well in case that's doing anything. Okay, so now I can show this again. Okay, now let's see if that stays put. Oh, wait a minute, what was the problem with this surface? Oh, I didn't do the sorry, I forgot to do the delete non-deformer history first. So 2 steps there when we're in this file. I messed that up, sorry. One more time. It's a little confusing how you've got this organized. Okay. Alright. So, yeah, first let's do edit, delete all by type, non-deformer history. Edit, delete all by type, non-deformer history. Then let's hide this for a moment. Then let's make sure all of these surfaces are selected. And then let's delete by type channels and just make sure these are unlocked in case there's some weird thing going on with them being locked. And then let's look here and turn that back on. Okay, good. So now it's working. So what happened is somehow you had surfaces selected both in your rig file and in your scene, this scene file with the set in it. You were keyframing surfaces and that was messing things up. So don't keyframe the surfaces, only keyframe the rig controls. I'll go ahead and save this in case you want a copy of it. Let me know, but you should be able to follow those steps and solve it. And then, yeah, move forward. You might want, for opposing him, you might want to use, oh, let's turn this back on. You might want to use IK for the hands. Oops. Because it just sort of depends. But I tend to think in a scene like this, you're going to be happier with IK. Like I can imagine if he's going to get up, he's going to brace his hand on something. And anytime you want to do something like brace your hand on something, you're going to want to use IK and not FK. So you're probably going to want to switch to IK. So make those fixes and then move forward from there. But yeah, I mean, I understand you got stuck with that problem, but you're a little bit behind now, so you'll need to catch up. Next up is Natalie, and you're saying you're having some trouble with your poses, saving your poses, and I noticed you haven't set any keyframes. You need to key all the controls with each pose. The other thing I've noticed is that you haven't referenced in the character. If we look at the reference editor, you just imported it, you didn't reference it in. Also, it looks like you didn't paint weights, for example, for the head. It just kind of squishes. So you need to, so I would first take a step back, go to your separate rig file, paint the weights for the head, then reference that into this file. Okay, so do all that first, and then if if you want to key all, if this isn't working, like you should be able to select all, or does any, these aren't working for, might work if it's referenced in, I guess we'll see, but if not, we can just easily make our own select all button. So to do that, I'm going to turn everything off here. I'll open up the script editor and clear all, edit clear all, and I will just turn on the curves and just select all these curves and triple click on this line and then middle mouse drag it here and click Mel. And now I have a button, like if I select something else, that'll select all of my controls. I can rename that. I'll go into the shelf editor here, and it's the one at the bottom, and I'll just give it a little name, like, I mean, I don't know if select will fit. Oh yeah, that fits. Okay, so now that's called select. And so when I have a pose, I'll hit S. But actually, there's one more step here, which is I might edit that one, because there's also the IK handles, and I think you're going to tend to want to use IK for this. So I'm just middle mouse dragging that, because I think you're going to have an easier time, placing the hands and stuff using IK. So let's edit. No, I didn't mean to do that. Let's edit this. I'm just going to middle mouse drag this down here, and we want the IK arm, copy, paste, and I'll put a, oh, you've copied and pasted. That's actually the problem right there. So the reason that script isn't working is because you copied and pasted the character into your scene rather than either importing it or referencing it, which broke all of the names, which broke the script that selects everything. So don't copy and paste in Maya. Just period. Just don't. But anyways, I'm just added those two things to this little script, and I'll triple click here, middle mouse drag, shelf editor, and let's delete this old one. I'm just going to hit the delete button, and I'll call this one select. And so it shows up select right there. And then now if I hit select, it includes my IK handles. So let's say that's a pose I like. I hit S. I see the red line. Go forward however many frames. Change the pose. Whatever. And then select everything, and then hit S. So make sure you select everything and hit S every time, and then I'll see they should change. I didn't change much on there, but oh, and I didn't keyframe these at the beginning either. So select everything, S. Okay. I don't know why those hands aren't moving. Are these? Yeah, for some reason that's... Oh. I did something wrong in my script here. Just want to see what this is. I'm just going to copy that, select. Oh, that's so silly. So instead, I put the wrong things in here. Instead of the IK arm controls, what I added was the things to switch the IK arm controls. So actually what I want are these two things. So this and this. Okay, now one more time, triple click, middle mouse drag. We can delete that one. I can edit this one. Okay, sorry about that. One more time, select everything, go here, make some changes. Now it should work. Make sure you select and S. Okay, so now we're seeing that change. Did I miss this one again? Okay, yeah, it's working. So obviously those aren't good poses, but just to show you to getting it to work. So don't copy paste in Maya. Fix the rig file, reference it into the scene. You can try using this thing, but you don't need to. You can just make your own script to select everything and make sure you're selecting everything and keyframing everything for every pose. Next up is Yao Nan. Yeah, this is looking good. One thing is when you turn these in, instead of just sending the scene file, do file archive scene, and that'll create a zip file that includes all of the dependency files like the texture images and all that kind of stuff. So I have everything in one folder. The other thing is that it's better to reference your rig into the scene than to import it. So it looks like you've just imported it and not brought it in as a reference. And I don't know which camera you're working with. It looks like you've got a few here, so let's just use this one. And do we have it? Are we looking at the whole timeline here, or whoops? Okay, it looks like maybe it does start where it was there. So now one thing I'm noticing, so there's a few good poses in here. You've got some stuff going on and changing, but one thing I'm noticing is, let's show your rig, and I don't need joints, is there's not much movement on the root. So in fact, as I scroll through here, there's a teeny bit at the end, but there's almost no movement on the root. And the root is the single most important control to change usually every pose. So the root should be moving and the root should be rotating nearly every pose. And so go back through these and think about how you might want to move the root. So maybe maybe he shifts his weight over one leg, maybe leans up a little bit there, something like that, and maybe he does the opposite for this pose. I'm just making it up. You can give it more thought than this, but the point is maybe he goes down a little bit for one, etc. So really concentrate on the root, the movement of the root. It should be moving and rotating basically in every pose. Yeah, so it's a good start. You're going to want to put some holds in there, so you're kind of holding those poses for longer. So and I think I talked about that on your reference video, that you don't want to just kind of have this kind of constant movement through a series of poses. And yeah, let's get some clarity on what the camera cuts are, because you should essentially be animating to the camera. You should animate, and because the way you pose your character will change depending on the angle of the camera. So really there should be one camera called like shot camera or something like that that's animated, so we know what we're looking at, what the point of view is of the camera for all the animation. One thing I'll show you actually, which is a good thing to know for it's kind of my trick to solve like a huge proportion of animation problems, which is anim import and export. So we can go to the rig group here. First I have to go Window, Settings, Preferences, Plugin Manager, and in here you'll find anim import export. I can see those are already checked on, and then I can go File, Export Selection, Options, change this to anim export. That will only show up if the plugin's loaded, and then I export the selection and save it somewhere, and then then you can import it back on there. So you select the same node and you do File, Import options, and do the anim import, and then import it. So, oh, and then one thing I forgot to show you on the export options, very important, is the one option is the hierarchy below. I think by default it's not turned on. So in your anim export options, make sure your hierarchy below, meaning everything below in the hierarchy. So it's all these nodes it'll get the animation off of. If you don't turn that on, it won't get the animation. So when you export, make sure you do hierarchy below, and then select the same node and do File, Import Animation. And the reason I'm telling you this is that if you want to reference the character in, what you could do is you could, delete this, export the animation, delete these out, File, create reference, and then bring in the character, and then select the rig node, and then import the animation, and it should put your animation back on it. So I don't have your separate rig file, so I can't demonstrate the entire process here, but hopefully you understand. I mean, it's not the end of the world if you don't have the rig references, but the idea of it is that you're working along, you find a problem with your rig, you go back to the rig file, you fix the rig, maybe some weights need to be fixed or something like that, whatever. You fix it in that rig file, and then when you open this file again, it's fixed in this file because it's referenced, and then you can use the rig for other stuff, and you always have an updated rig. You don't have to try to export the rig out of this file to use it for something else. So that kind of gives you the idea of why you'd want to reference the rig in. I mean, also in kind of a more of a production environment, you'll have one person working on the animator can be working while the rigger is still working, and people can work in parallel is kind of part of the idea of referencing. But even when you're working on your own, it's worth doing. Okay, next up is Sharon, and see what we've got so far. Alright, so it's good that you've started to put in some poses. I think that there's just much too much distance being covered for those poses. I imagine there'd be all kinds of steps in there, so I think you're going to want to really simplify this. Also, I mean, you might want to start on a wide shot like this, and I can see that you've made other cameras with other angles, but really what you want is sort of more of a shot camera that shows us what the angle is. And you mentioned some rig problems. Is this reference or something? So let me know. You might want to, for something like this, you could go FK or IK. Oh, okay, and what happened to the face here? I'm guessing that is a weighting problem. Is it? Yeah, it sure looks like it. So for that, did you reference in your rig file? Where's the reference editor? Yes, you did. So let's open up the rig file and see if what's going on with the face. But as far as the poses, make sure you're looking at the reference and make sure you have them physically in space, not so far apart, because you're going to have to come up with all the movement in between that, and that's right now it already looks like more than 10 seconds to me to cover that much ground, probably, maybe not. But then also the camera, make sure there's just one shot camera that's animated so we can know exactly what point of view we're looking at all times, because you should be animating to the camera, that meaning that you should be looking through your shot camera when you set your poses so that you know exactly what it's going to look like in that point of view. Let's open up the rig. Oh, and I had to rename this file because it should end with like .mb or .ma, and you had it ending with like a number. So let's see if we can figure out what's going on here. Okay, yeah, clearly that's influencing the head, and That's a separate object, which actually should help. Right mouse click, paint, skin cluster weights, double click. Let's kind of dock this over here. Turn on my outliner. Okay. So we are concerned about the, what is that, elbow left? Is that what it was, or something below that? I mean, what we could try to do, since, yeah, that's controlling some of that, maybe the shoulder is, but anything from here down really shouldn't be controlling that. So for this surface, I am going to start with this, and I'm going to change this to replace with a value of 0, flood, and then I'm going to use my down arrow and flood. Oops. That's right, I'm going to mirror it afterwards anyways. Okay, let's see if it's still happening now. Must have missed something there. Did you do a like a jaw thing? You did. Okay. Well, let's just try that again. And it's got to be one of those joints down there. Let's do I'm just looking for any change in, whoops, what have I done? Color. Yeah, I see some there, like place with value 0, flood. Yeah, I might just be putting it back on afterwards. So what we might do instead, since this is not working well, is you've got the I might just type in star jaw star to find the jaw easier. So it might be easier to add than subtract if we're having trouble there. So replace with a value of 1, and what I might do is let's bend it so that we can see the problem. Oh, it's mostly gone now anyways. So, but the other thing I might do is take some of these vertices and hammer skin weights, hammer skin weights. That looks like it did some good. Okay. Alright, so now it's not bending that. So let's zero that out. Let's make sure this is mirrored skin weights from the positive to negative. This X points to the positive side. Apply, close, save, continue, open. Let's open this up. Loads in the reference. Okay, and no more jaw problem. So if you have trouble with that and you want me to send you the file I saved, just let me know. But I think that solves that. So I don't know, let me know what other issues you're running into, but use your reference. Don't have her try to cover so much distance. Make sure you nail down your camera choices and are just looking through one camera, and keep going. Next up is Alena. First thing I would say is you've just turned in these images, and if you look at the submissions directions, it says to archive your scene and turn in a zip file of that. So make sure you do that from now on, because you've described all these problems, but I can't really help too much just by looking at these image files. So, and then some of the other stuff you described is covered, either in this video or the videos in the course. You might want to kind of rewatch those and read the text of the modules, because things like setting keyframes and should be covered in there. So take a look at that again, and yeah, and keep going. So I don't, besides looking at these images, there's not much for me to review. And always check the submissions instructions, because you want to make sure that you're turning in the correct files. And also then I can better answer your questions, because if I don't have the scene file, I can't see, for example, what you're talking about with the outliner, or problems with keyframes or any of that. So yeah, turn in the archive scene. Okay, next up is Andrea. Okay, let's try the movie file. Okay, this is Andrea's movie file. I think it's coming along. I think you could simplify the camera. I think for a short animation, there's a lot of cuts, and then you might want to have fewer, but maybe there's not that many. I'm not so thrilled with this view for that, because we're cropping off her feed and the bottle, and there's kind of a lot of space on the bottom here, so I think maybe a different framing for that. I think you could, yeah, just go simpler on the camera. And the typical thing is to start with a wide shot and then kind of work your way in towards close-ups. That's not a hard and fast rule, but that's sort of the usual idea, is to establish the scene as a whole and then kind of examine parts of it more closely. I think you're going to need a lot of breakdown poses to kind of get her from one pose to the next, because they're fairly extreme changes. But I think this is coming along really well. I mean, you've got everything working, and you've got some good poses that you've obviously put some time into. So it's a little. So yeah, try something different with the camera. Maybe just simplify. Honestly, if the whole thing was just done in a wide shot for something like this, it would probably work okay, just because of the nature of it. Because it's supposed to look sort of like a photo shoot or something, or at least that's my take on it. Or maybe you start a little closer, and then at the end you have the reveal of the sort of selfie camera at the end. But yeah, there's some really good work in here, and it's a little hard to judge the animation at this point. But make sure you're putting in some holds and thinking about the breakdown poses, how you get from one of those poses to the next, and keep going. Good work. Next up is Ariana, and I can see that you've done some poses, although when I open the Maya file, you haven't referenced your character into the scene yet, so I don't know. It seems a little out of context. I think you're going to want to make sure your scene's set up, and then reference the character into the scene, and then make your camera choices, and then animate to the camera with a character in the scene. So for example, if he's sitting, maybe he's sitting on the bed, or sitting on a chair, or sitting on the floor, but it matters for the way you animate where the character is compared to the objects and props in the scene. So I think moving forward, make sure you're working inside of the scene, that you've also nailed down your camera choices. So you should have a sort of a shot camera, that you've created a separate camera where you've made your camera decisions, because you want to animate to the camera, meaning the point of view of the camera matters for the poses, because a pose might look different, say, from the front than it does from the side, and you want to make your pose choices, keeping in mind the camera. So yeah, so this isn't, obviously, as you mentioned, you're a little behind and you're catching up. So keep going, and let me know if I can help. Next up is Ekaterina. Okay, let's take a look at the My file. So it's a good start. I think that, when you look at this, you're only moving the head and the arms. So let's see if this guy's working. Yep. Nope. Oh, that's the paper man. Okay. Let's do this one. Great. So what you want to do is look at each of these poses for this guy, and you should really be adjusting all the controls on every pose, even if it's subtly. So, maybe the root moves a little bit down, a little bit over here, maybe kind of rotates a little bit, or something like that. The other thing I would say is that for something like this, you're going to want to use IK hands instead of FK. So I'm going to delete the keyframes on the, where's delete selected? Here, and change this to IK. Now it will mean redoing the positioning of this stuff and kind of reparenting that, but the point is that I can make adjustments to my body, like let's say moving this. See how his hand stays where it is? So I can do all kinds of stuff to the body and the hand will stay what it is. So go through each pose and tweak every control for every pose. I would, so you'd have to go reanimate the hands because we switched to IK, but that's going to be the proper thing for this. So right now he looks very frozen because his body stays completely still while, was it camera 2? Yeah. See how his body, if you kind of imagine sort of like covering up this part of him and see, it's like it's all perfectly still. You see a tiny bit of stretching there, but the weight should shift, the body should lean and move forward and back. Look at your reference, you shot reference, look at how the body moves. Sometimes it's very subtle, but it's certainly not standing frozen like a mannequin. So, and again, always the most important control is the root. So go back over those poses, switch the hands to IK, and kind of move forward from there. I feel like this camera moves too big. So if you wanted to, let's select the camera. Oh, there's a lot of keyframes on the camera here. So you've got this big swinging camera movement. If you wanted to swing over to Paperman, what I would say to do, I'm going to get rid of this one and this one. And what I would say is you're going to want to start from like an over the shoulder shot. Like, I don't know, something like this. And then, whoops, I didn't keyframe it. I usually have auto keyframe on, so maybe it's an over the shoulder shot, something like this, and I'll just hit S to make sure I got that. And then a camera move like that, and maybe I'll get rid of this and move this back, but maybe this holds for some kind of action here. So I think something like that will work better, because what you had before was this big 180-degree camera swing, and I found it really disorienting. So try to kind of simplify that camera. You can still end up here, but start up on something that isn't with the camera pointing in the exact opposite direction, because that's a little disorienting. So an over-the-shoulder shot as a starting point for that camera move would be better. But it's great you've got two characters in there, and you've got your scene planned out. I think just really kind of dig into those poses on the big guy. Okay, next up is Shane, and looks like you've got some good spaceship stuff going on. I don't know if you want it smooth like that or not. If you do want it smooth like that, you're going to need to put in some holding edges, I would think, to keep some of these shapes, like Control Shift X to get this thing, and whoops, something like that, and then you keep the shape of that. So and then did you reference this guy in? Yes. Okay, so let's open that up, and I think you were talking about the some eyeball issue. Let's take a look at that. Oh, well, this head's not really properly rigged or bound, and are the oh yeah, you're gonna, so are these supposed to be controlling the eyeballs, these things? Wait, what is it? Yeah, is that just the curve? Just pulling these out in front, so I guess these are the eyeball controls, are they? And okay, and are these controlling the eye? Oh yeah, those are working fine. It seems like it. Oops. Sorry, I keep picking the wrong thing. Okay. What's this doing? Oh, yeah, that's working. Okay. I'm not sure what your eye thing is, but the neck we'll need to fix, so image planes, is that on? Why can't I select this thing? Oh, I turned the surfaces off. Sorry. So yeah, let's just see what's going on with the weights on this paint skin weights tool. Yeah, it's all 100% on the head, and there's nothing else that's part of that. So I would just kind of, so for whatever reason, it's only bound to the head joint, and there's no other. So you could add influence of other joints, but just to keep it simple, what I would probably do is delete history on this, and I would then select the deformed joints along with the head and bind it again, and let's just, kind of doesn't matter what we do, I don't think. Okay, so now probably gonna have to fix the weighting of this. Well, actually, it's not too bad to begin with. At least that neck's working. I think if you wanted to do the jaw, I show the jaw in the video, you're gonna have to really get in there and do some serious painting. So if you'd like to use the jaw, I could demonstrate it here, but try just watching the video, and then let me know how far you get. Yeah, this is working. So actually that was pretty good, for just a first stab, and the eyes do seem to be working. So oh, look at that. So not so much. So let's remove the weight from those. So head. Yeah, see, we don't want anything on that eye. So replace the value of 1 and something like that. And I'm just avoiding the jaw just because I'll be on here for another 20 minutes if I'm gonna do the jaw. But let's see if this works now. And the eyes, yeah, are working. Oops. Okay, let's just make sure we mirror skin weights. Mirror skin weights options. From positive to negative, apply. Okay. And good. Okay. I'll save that, and if you want me to send that to you, I can. Otherwise, you could probably do it. But good doing the jaw, you'd have to, really painstakingly get in there and weight those points. Which I don't mind demonstrating if you want help, but it is covered in the original course materials, so you can just watch it from there and see if you can imitate that. So let me know if that solves your issues, and yeah, you're a little bit behind now, so just keep moving forward and let me know how I can help. Next up is Lindsay, and it looks like you've yeah, I don't have this file, so I'm going to need to let's see what happens. Turn that on. Okay, there's the character, and let's see what we got so far. Oh, it doesn't look like it's moving yet. Is it moving? So you're saying it renders dark when it's bright in the file. If you're rendering with Arnold, you should use Arnold lights. I know we really haven't gone under rendering yet, but sort of the default renderer is Arnold. No, and if you under the Arnold menu, if you use lights and use like a sky dome light or something like that, it will, light your scene plenty with just that one light. But if you're using regular Maya lights, you need to make them very bright in Arnold just because of the decay and stuff like that. So, but why is it doing that when I go in the shaded mode? Oh, okay, there we go. So I think, and I wrote about this in the separately, but I think what you want to do is, separate everything out into sort of groups, like your robot file and your chair and your other props and stuff like that, and then export them as separate files, and then maybe just reference them all in, and then you'd have them all in the reference editor here, and you can either check them or uncheck them. And then when you've separated everything out, we can look at the file sizes of those different sort of sub files. Like one, say, includes all the desks and chairs, and one includes the walls, and one includes the robot thing, and one includes this office chair. And then we can go through those and say, oh, well, the really big file is the office chair, or whatever it is, and then we can troubleshoot that specific thing. It's kind of hard to figure out what's going on with everything together here, because I don't know what's making this file huge and therefore causing the crash, as you mentioned. But is there supposed to be animation on him already? It doesn't look like there's any keyframes. So yeah. So okay, well, so let's get that stuff separated out so we can troubleshoot it.